There we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wine, Women, and Words. I am Michelle, and Diana is here, of course. And we are continuing our birthday celebration month with Seth Margolis, who has returned to us. Hello, Seth. Thank you for coming back.
Hey, it's great to be here.
And you're not on your cell phone this time. I remember last time you had hold your
It's
phone.
a lot more relaxing.
So no technical difficulties today.
No, not so far.
I think
you're a pro at being our guest now, so.
Yes, it's second nature. I got to keep writing books so I can keep coming back.
Yes, exactly. I think Michelle and I don't have any problems with this plan at all. We approve this plan.
Yes. It is a Wine, Women, and Words sanctioned idea, so.
Will do.
So we are in the second week of our birthday month, and usually, I mean, not this year, but I've tried to stretch out birthday celebrations at least a week. So we're going strong for the month.
I do a full month. You only do a week?
Well, I try. It doesn't always work. Today,
in my household and in my family, it's a full month, even a little longer. I get the whole month of October up until the 7th, and then my sister gets from the 7th to Christmas. So
I have the opposite approach, which is my mother, my son, and I all have the same birthday. And I've never particularly enjoyed my birthday. So now my son is in his 20s, but I think of it as his birthday and his celebration. And magically, I don't get older, but he does. So
that's a good approach.
Yeah. Yeah.
My father-in-law and his brother are 7 years and 2 days apart. So they always had to have joint birthday celebrations.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my mother and I had the same birthday, so we often would celebrate it together. And then when my son was born on the same day, I'm not a particularly spiritual person, but I thought there had to be some connection there.
Yeah, because I mean, what are the odds of that? That is so rare and random. And I mean, for it to happen, I've heard of other people having it, where it's like father, daughter, parent to child, but then grandparent, child, and then
grandchild. It was when that happened. Anyway, it was a great moment on many levels, of course. So, anyway, so I don't have birthdays anymore. So.
I've just stopped counting, but my daughter is really into numbers now. Like she's learned to count to 20, and she's really into when everyone's birthday is. So does Daddy have a birthday? Does Landon have a birthday? And now she figured out that when it's your birthday, you get a year older. So every day for like the past week, she's going, "Mommy, how old are you?"
Well, if she can only count to 20, you're pretty good.
I'll ask her like, "Well, how old do you think I am?" And she'll go, 3. Okay, I'm 3.
We'll take it.
So we have I have a stack of books here, and it's really exciting. Our book of the month is Dear Fang with Love by Rufi Thorpe. And I actually think both of us have already finished this book. And then we have your new book, President's Day.
Yay.
Which I was following religiously on Amazon to see when it would release. I don't know why I didn't just pre-order it. It would have made my life a whole lot easier.
I thought you did.
But see, and I just had this mystery happen to me the other day. I always forget that if you pre-order a book, Amazon doesn't charge you until the book comes out. So in my mind, that's money already spent and it's gone, but then I get hit with a random Amazon charge that I don't understand. So probably is a better thing that I waited. But I was very excited to see that came out. And then we have The Empress on it, the book that started it all.
Yeah.
Well, at least for Wine, Women, and Words.
Yeah, that's what I meant. So what are you drinking this evening?
I thought you'd never ask. So I'm having a little white wine, and it's actually, can you see, there it is. Yeah. And it's actually a really nice wine that a friend who's a wine expert recommended. It's a Muscadet Sep Man, whatever that means, 2015. And so it's a really nice, it's got a little effervescence, he told me to say. Because I said it was a little fizzy, and he said, no, effervescence. So cheers. Here's to effervescence.
Yay.
We would have taken fizzy for the record.
Yeah, it's still fizzy to me, but apparently not the enophiles word. So
I was gonna drink red wine today, but it's really, well, it's freezing in here now because we turned on the air conditioning, but it's been so hot and humid here that white wine was in order.
Yeah, red wines are just not good for warm days, I find. I prefer a white wine or rosé on a warm day.
I don't know. I think this is I'm squinting like I can read the bottle all the way across the kitchen. But I think this is a Pinot Grigio, I think. It's really good. That's really all that I care about.
Doing the trick.
Yeah, I'm drinking Jardin des Charmes, a rosé. I've been in a really rosé mood lately. If it's not sangria, it's rosé that I've been drinking. But basically, I picked it up because I'm slightly obsessed with a trip to France this fall, so everything's French. So yeah, that's why I'm drinking that one.
And Diana is still going to smuggle me in a suitcase. I've decided. It's going to be a layover in O'Hare, and I'm going to find my way to the suitcase and get in.
Sounds like a plan.
Little, I can do it.
So, Seth, tell me,
Yes.
why'd you decide to write a book about Bannon?
Not fair.
But it is fairly timely because, I mean, Bannon is getting a lot of press. Frontline did a whole special on him because he's the man behind the president. And then we've got President's Day, which is basically about a man behind the president, help put him in. I'm sorry, I haven't had much of a chance to really look into it too further, so take it away. I'm sure you can explain it better than I can.
Yeah, so it's not. I wrote it several years ago, so long before reality sort of caught up with fiction. But it's about a very, very wealthy man, a billionaire in New York, who is in the private equity business. He's acquired dozens and dozens of companies, and he's sort of like, Alexander at age 21, who had conquered all of the known world. There was nothing left for him, and so he decides, for reasons of his own, to go after the White House. It's sort of the ultimate acquisition for him. And the premise of the book that he states is that Washington is really sort of the back office of America. New York is where real power lies. So it's a political thriller in many ways based in New York, not in Washington. And New York is a place that I live in. It's a place I know really well. I go to Washington a lot, but I don't know it as well. But that premise that Washington exists to serve Wall Street business interests rather than the other way around was something that intrigued me. It's become very, with Bernie Sanders during the election, of course, and now with Trump and Bannon et al. In the White House, it's actually, the novel seems sort of prescient. But a couple of people have said, oh, you really, you got this out quick once, Donald Trump happened, but I wish I could write that fast, frankly. But that's the premise, is that it's a total outsider who decides to kind of make the ultimate acquisition, and that acquisition is the White House. But he, unlike Trump, but maybe like Bannon, actually, I hadn't really thought of that, doesn't want to be president. That would be sort of irritating for him, and it would open up all sorts of scrutiny. I think actually our current president is starting to feel that a little bit. He just wants to be the power behind the throne. And in reality, he has an agenda of his own involving revenge for a death in his family. So it's not just, he's not just doing it to see if he can do it. He has an actual, an agenda that he wants to accomplish through the presidency, but he does not want to be president. So that's sort of the premise of the novel.
I love that. Have you read it yet, Michelle? Because I just got mine on Monday, so I haven't had a chance to pick it up.
I haven't yet. I was really behind in reading for a while, and then the fact that I flew through Dear Fang in a weekend, and then I'm like 20 pages away from reading another book that I was working on. So now I have like all this free time. Well, okay, free time. I have all this time to read. So, and I just read a review. I'm kind of skipping around on my questions, but I just read a review this morning about President's Day that said, if House of Cards and Scandal had a baby, it would be President's Day. And I love both of those shows. So
I think you need to use that phrase, Seth, in your marketing.
Yeah, no, I didn't even see that. I gotta look for that. Well, first of all, I love House of Cards. I actually read the book by Michael Dobbs, which I would recommend to you. It takes place in England. It's really about a member of parliament, not about a U.S. politician. That's the genesis of the whole story. And then I love the book, and it became a miniseries that the BBC produced that was shown here about probably at least 20 years ago. And I forget the actor. He's a brilliant actor who starred in it. And then it was adapted for I guess HBO. Is it an HBO show? Netflix, yeah. So, and I actually think, this is a case where I love the book, really liked the British show. The American show I like, but it's sort of starting, I think it would have been better, more compressed, it's sort of, anyway, I don't want to put it down.
That's the way it seems to go when British shows end up being translated into American shows. I've seen that a lot with whether it's television shows or movies. Yeah. I love a lot of the British productions, and Death at a Funeral is one of my favorite British movies. And then they did an American version. And when they came here to America with the American version, I think it was like Chris Rock was the main guy. Yeah. And they acted like it was this whole brand new thing that Chris wrote. And he was like, yeah, okay. I was like, no. And it wasn't quite as refined as it was in the American version as it was in the English version. So not everything that was British translates well. And I don't think we need to translate everything from Britain to the US.
Yeah, just leave it alone. Exactly. Well, and House of Cards, I do admire the show in the U.S. and the Netflix show, but my recollection is that it was just 2 seasons in England, so it was very compressed. It was very satisfying, and then it was done. Whereas the one in the U.S., I don't know if it's in its 3rd or 4th season. They just keep sort of chugging along. I think the book and the British series ends when he becomes president, and here it just keeps going, so and I watched some Scandal. That one sort of went off the rails a little bit for me, although some people have said my novel President's Day is pretty fantastical too, but I enjoyed that show very much. So I'll take that, the files of House of Cards and Scandal.
But I'm finding what we're finding an awful lot with our political thrillers and just political fiction, I should say, and just in general, that's not quite so fanciful anymore. I mean, is now considered a documentary as opposed to a mockumentary.
Yeah, it is true that President's Day has things in it that, to my knowledge, have not happened. I mean, there's also, as with House of Cards, there's murder, there's, suspicious plane crashes and things like that. But, the basic premise that the White House is for sale, and all you have to do is sort of, spend a lot of money and pretty much say anything and you can get there, has kind of been proven true. And so I haven't watched, for instance, the latest season of House of Cards because it just seems to pale in comparison to reality. And even the show Veep, which I love, the HBO comedy with Julia Louis-Dreyfus, I haven't watched the season for the same reason. It just seems if I want to see farce, you can read the news now. You don't need to watch HBO. So
you can just go on Twitter and you're good.
Yeah, exactly. Much quicker. So, But yeah, so with President's Day, I remember when meeting with my publisher last fall, like in October, talking about publicity for it. And we said, I mean, everyone just assumed that Donald Trump would be this flash in the pan, it would go away, it would be Hillary Clinton in the White House. And, and so we sort of planned the publicity accordingly. And of course, it didn't work out that way at all. And, it's a challenge to draw attention to a political thriller in an age in which politics is kind of thrilling in a strange and unsettling way, real politics. So,
I saw a headline for an article I didn't get a chance to read yet, but it was basically the television shows with that deal with politics. They're all showing the ratings decreases.
Is that right? Well,
yeah.
My luck to publish a book now.
But that's okay, because I think your books are required summer reading, at least for
me. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I read Semper Sonnet last summer. I always have to have a book for when I'm in the pool. So that was something.
I love the idea of thinking of you in the pool in California, reading my book.
Exactly. Those are my weekends. And I got so distracted by Semper Sonnet, I think I might have mentioned before that I got this really weird sunburn. Because I was so distracted by the book.
Wow, that's the worst thing I've ever heard about my writing, frankly.
Really, though, it's a compliment, because I didn't notice the sunburn. Yeah. I was so distracted by the book. I was so into the book. So we'll have to see if that happens again with this.
I was going to say, good. On the other hand, put a lot of sunscreen on and hope you get really tan reading President.
Yeah, extra sunscreen before I read the book.
Yeah.
So you might give her the perfect summer tan this year.
Yes.
There we go.
We'll just go into it with a different approach this time.
Right.
Totally works for me.
So one thing that I kind of have a problem, so I'm not huge into politics, like I kind of know the basic stuff, but I couldn't really hold an in-depth conversation about it. When you're writing a political thriller, how do you kind of write it to make it believable and plausible, but also to make it so anyone can understand it without, being a political science major?
Right. So, I mean, that is the challenge is to make it interesting as a thriller, but also plausible, because it takes place in the world that a lot of people know, at least superficially, right? So they know elections are held in November, and primaries are held the year before, and so you have to follow a certain with when it's about the race for the presidency, you have to follow a certain sequence of events, right? So, and that's something that I had to do, but at the same time, that becomes just the foundation, and then you just take off from there, and just imagine, in this case, how is it possible that that someone could actually engineer this, right? That he could come behind the scenes, essentially by himself, a candidate for the White House, and then pull the strings from behind. So I am a political junkie. I watch political shows all night. That if I weren't talking to you right now, I'd be doing that right now. And I always was that. So I had a pretty good background in some of it. Some of the mechanics of it, I had to refresh, when certain primaries were held and that kind of thing. But that was, especially compared to Semper Sonnet, which I had to do a lot of research for. This one was relatively easy to research. I had to research things like, how planes operate and don't operate, things like that. Even cobalt mining, believe it or not, in Africa plays a role in this book. So I had to understand cobalt and how it's mined and what it's used for. Things like that were peripheral to the actual story, but it was really important that I get it right. But the politics of it, I had a pretty good grounding in, and I've never written anything political before, so I could just use everything that I had been, idly acquiring over the years, watching television, reading the paper every morning. So it wasn't easier to write in some ways. It had its own challenges, but compared to Semper Sonnet, a lot easier from a research perspective. That one I had to do a lot of research, both book research and also going to various sites.
And since you mentioned Semper, so you switched genres. Your last book was a historical fiction thriller, and now you're a political thriller. Was it hard? I know I don't really know a lot of authors that kind of jump genres like that.
Yeah, it's. I think it drives my agent crazy because, the irony is, so during the day, I write fiction every day, and I publish I think 7 or 8 novels, but I'm also a branding consultant by day, and do a lot of work with big companies, advising them on their brand, and I do a lot of traveling for that. And I've totally failed to establish my own brand in writing. It makes it hard because if you like historical fiction, which I know you both do, or even historical thrillers, then here comes a political thriller, which historical fiction tends to appeal to women, political thrillers more to men, although there's all sorts that's a vast generalization. So as for someone who makes his living branding companies, I've really done a poor job of creating a consistent brand for myself. That said, and I've written a satire on the New York City real estate market called Closing Costs. I wrote a domestic drama, I guess you could say, called Losing Isaiah, which was made into a movie a number of years ago. So there's a couple of mysteries, a psychological thriller. So no consistency. Maybe I'll figure that out someday. But I realized that in school you probably heard this. Your teacher said, write what you know. That's always the first piece of advice they give if you're facing a blank piece of paper or a blank computer screen. Write what you know. But I think for me, and I would give this advice to to any writer, I would say write what you want to know. Write something that gives you the opportunity to explore an idea or a place or a character or a plot idea that intrigues you. And so for me, I love Tudor England. I always have. That's just my favorite, one of my favorite periods of history. And I wanted to set a novel there. And that's how Semper Sonnet came around. As I mentioned before, I'm a political junkie. I watch political shows all night long. I read every article about politics. I follow politicians on Twitter. I want to explore that, and that's why I wrote President's Day. So I don't write what I know, I write what I want to know, what I want to explore more. And that's sort of how it happened. It's not a conscious thing, because if it were a conscious thing, I would have remained consistent, and we'd be talking tonight about the return of Semper Sonnet instead of a completely new book. Although I do think I'm going to write a sequel to Semper Sonnet, but not right away.
So I'm gonna have a Friday. Well, I mean, even with just these two, I mean, the historical fiction thing is my thing, and Michelle likes those political thrillers a lot. So it's like you wrote a book for each of us.
Maybe that's my strategy. Yeah, I don't think so though.
I think it works.
Yeah, but it's fun to shift genres, and it's hard to. I mean, I've had a number of different publishers. I've had the same agent for 25 years. And I know my agent would prefer, she's wonderfully supportive and will support me whatever I do, but an agent wants you to build a following, and it's much easier to build a following when you stick to the same thing. And many authors, particularly in genres like thrillers, mysteries, tend to write, they have the same character with different stories each time. So never been able to do that, but maybe someday.
Yeah, I can already see it. They're completely. Julian is going to be very, very, very different from Lee. I really don't see them being at all alike.
He's a totally unlikable character. He's had a great tragedy in his life. So he's the billionaire protagonist at the heart of President's Day, who has an old score to settle, and he realizes that the only way he can do it is by essentially seizing power in Washington. And all the wealth that he's acquired, all the companies he owns media companies, he owns one of the great private art collections. None of that will do him any good for what he really needs to accomplish. I don't want to give that away. And so he goes after the ultimate acquisition, which is
that's
power in Washington.
I love
that's pretty extreme. If nothing will help him get revenge except the White House, that's.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not to give it away, but there are certain things that only the commander in chief can do, involved in the U.S. military, and that's really what it was. I mean, you know, no matter how wealthy you are, you can't order an invasion. Right. So I'll say no more. But so that's kind of that's sort of the premise, is that he has a reason for this, a very personal one.
So. And well, speaking of Julian and his, you know, the fact that he's kind of a villain, would you classify him as one of those villains that you just love? I mean, that seems to be a trend now with a lot of fiction and television shows where people root for the bad guys, the guys you're not supposed to root for. Is that something you want the reader to do with Julian?
Well, you know, so in this book, there are two main characters, a protagonist and an antagonist. So Julian is the evil genius and the billionaire who's trying to seize power. And then there's a young man who worked for him and it didn't end well, who figures out what's going on and tries to stop them. So it's sort of a race to see who's going to prevail. And so I don't know that you root for him exactly, but there is a certain satisfaction in, and that's, I think, what you're alluding to, in watching someone hatch a plot and move with it, right? So in House of Cards, you know, we don't really root for the Kevin Spacey character or his wife, but you don't exactly want him to get caught either. You just want to kind of see how it plays out. And I hope that's what readers of President's Day feel, that they want to follow this character. They don't like him necessarily, and they don't necessarily want him to succeed, but they're enjoying watching him go through the paces of doing what he feels he needs to do. And I think you're right that I'm trying to think of other examples, but as long as we brought up House of Cards, that's certainly one of them. You know,
well, like for me, Michelle knows I have this problem where I love the villains in television shows and books.
They're always so much more interesting. Like they're a lot more layers to them. So they're more
well developed. There's a reasoning behind their actions. A lot of times, you know, when you have the protagonist, I'm going to be the good guy. I'm thinking about the show Once Upon a Time. That's the one that really comes to mind for me right now, even though it has absolutely nothing to do with politics.
Yeah.
But with Once Upon a Time, you had the good guys, you had the woman who came in and was like, I'm going to save this whole town, and all these fairy tale characters. And so she had this background, but she didn't really have a really fully developed driving force. Unlike the character, the bad guy, the evil queen, who was the mayor of the town, who had this driving force, who had these complexities and these conflicts. And those are, I think, characters both for women and men those are the ones who are really allowed to develop and be conflicted. Where, you know, I'm sure with Julian's conflicted about things, or he just might be the total complete, you know, deranged mastermind. Who knows? We'll find out.
Well, you will. And also he does have, I mean, he had a terrible thing happen to him. So, you know, I don't know that he was a nice guy beforehand, but this made him, you know, really relentlessly focused on one thing.
And that's something really fascinating to explore, because oftentimes you see in a lot of books and in movies, something bad happens to the person, and so that drives them to want to be the hero in the situation. You don't have that driving force to kind of turn them the other way.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, it's fun to write villains too. It's just more interesting to, especially since I think I'm just such a great, nice person. It's fun to create someone who is the complete and total opposite. Well, for one thing, he's a billionaire, but for another, he is sort of an evil genius. So I like to think I'm not.
Well, there's a quote I heard from a musician, and I can't remember the musician who said it, but he was like, the death metal musicians, the hardcore rockers that you think that are horrible, are the nicest, most sweetest guys in the world.
Yeah.
Yet the happy-go-lucky pop stars are the ones who are always angry and upset.
That's funny. I'd love to think that's true somehow.
I mean,
yeah.
Oh, and when you joined us last year about Semper, you said that Semper came from the question, what if Elizabeth really did have a child? That was kind of where the idea came from. What was the question for President's Day?
I think it's what I said before, which is, essentially, is the White House for sale? Which maybe that's a question that's been answered in real life. But I just wanted to, is it possible for someone to sort of set their sights on achieving that kind of power in America? So it's a sort of a coup, but it's not, with armies marching down the street. It's sort of a stealing of the power of this country, essentially through money and through ruthlessness. So, and it actually, I remember it goes back to, so this is before your time, but way back in the Reagan administration, I remember when he was elected, he said that he wanted to bring to Washington to be in his cabinet. And I think Trump has said something similar. He said men for whom this serving as, Treasury Secretary, Commerce Secretary would be a step down for them, that they would be so successful that serving in the federal government would be a step down. And I remember thinking that's a terrible concept, to think that serving at the highest level of government is a step down from anything. It should be for anyone a step up, to be, entrusted with that. And so, that was the genesis. I didn't write it for many years after that, but thinking about, someone for whom would never want to be president. That would be, in a certain sense, having to give up too much, right? But wanted that power. He just didn't want the trappings of it. And I think our current president probably feels that way too. I think he misses his old life, and
I remember he actually said it, that he misses his old life.
Right. What he gave up. Not just the privacy. I think he liked his old plane just well enough. And, Trump, I live in Manhattan, and he hasn't been back here since he was inaugurated. He's afraid to come back. I mean, but so that was sort of the question I set out to ask.
That too for him, that mindset, because I think he was around a lot of people who loved him, who absolutely loved him, who said yes to him all the time. And you don't get that when you come into the political arena. You get a lot of hate. Doesn't matter how good you are, you're still going to have a good chunk of the population hate you. And I think he's able to quite deal with that as well.
Yeah.
It's one of the problems. Yeah.
So that was the question: is just, is it possible to seize power in that way behind the scenes, and then to think, how would you do it? Literally step by step, how would you go about doing it? And that's what Julian Mello ultimately does. I won't tell you whether he succeeds or not, but that was the question that I set out to answer.
I am even more excited about reading this book now than I was before.
Oh, good.
I was excited. I was like, oh, a new book from Seth. I'm gonna love it. It's gonna be so much fun. Now I'm like, okay, I might have to make room in the reading schedule even sooner than before.
Next time you're by a pool.
Well, I've got one in my backyard, so.
Oh, good.
My husband doesn't make me yard work this weekend. I'm still totally going to be there.
Oh, I'm jealous.
It's okay. You have a city with Hamilton and Broadway.
We do have that.
Yeah, I get jealous of that.
Yeah.
Straight off.
I have a pink plastic splash pool that the kids splash in, so you guys can
I don't picture you reading in that.
I could totally picture her reading in that. Just give her one of those their sippy cups or her books. She'll be fine.
I tried the other day, and they just started splashing me. It became a game to see if they could get mommy wet. So it didn't work out.
Do it during nap time.
Yeah, that mythical time.
Yeah.
Spoken like somebody who's never had a kid. Yeah, get all that during nap time.
Right. The 6 hours that they're both asleep every afternoon.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah, because kids sleep all the time, right?
All the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can just tell them, go to sleep.
Right.
There you go.
Magically.
They say, okay. So was it just totally creepy for you watching the election, or watching the campaigns and the primaries and the debates? Was it creepy for you to see your story kind of like unfold?
Well, it wasn't until Trump actually won, because then it seemed that, it's a very different story than the one I wrote, but it was a really strange thing to, and I thought, oh, maybe, I'll get credit for prescience, or, that my ability to see into the future. But actually, if anything, people say, oh, as I said before, boy, you really dashed this one out since, November. Well, I mean, publishers, it takes them almost a year just to publish a book once they have it and accept it. So I wrote it long before Trump emerged as a candidate, and I had real life people in mind, a composite for Julian Mello, the antagonist, I guess, of this book, but it was never Donald Trump. It was never.
I see Steve Bannon, like I said when you first came on. I see.
I hadn't really thought of that. I mean, he was actually I think he was a partner at Goldman Sachs, and then he was a movie producer.
Seinfeld.
Right, and he owns a piece of the show. That's crazy enough, right?
Yeah.
So I never really thought of him as a model for this. I have to think about that. Yeah, maybe I conjured him up in my mind. So. Yeah, he is stranger than fiction, though. So, for sure.
Yeah, and he's got some weird. I watched only a little bit of the Frontline special because I can only take so much now of the headlines and the currents, and they talked about some of his crazy ideas. If you can look up that Frontline special on him, he's got.
Oh, I will. That I missed.
Yeah, they've got some he's got some serious out there. Ideas about history and things coming around again.
He really does. Yeah. But anyway, a total coincidence. Not my character. So.
No, but I do look forward to getting to know this character because I love the bad guys.
Yeah.
As I say as I put the book.
I know, I can hear you doing it.
Yes, that's what that sound is me petting the book as we talk, because I'm already like, yes, a bad guy. I already know I'm going to love him.
I'm just kind of flipping through it as we talk, and I have a really nasty habit. I'm trying to break it of reading the last paragraph on the last page.
Oh, I don't know.
Mainly because by the time you get to the last paragraph, like the plot twists and everything, they're done, so you're not losing any of the surprise, but you do know who's still alive at the end. So
don't say it on the podcast.
Yeah.
But I'm trying not to do it anymore because I've had a couple books that I totally ruined it for myself.
Yeah.
So I try if I flip through it, I'll catch words and freak out and think that I've ruined something for myself.
You're your own spoiler.
I know, I do it to myself.
Doctor Who. There's a Doctor Who policy. He tears out the last page of the book so that it never ends.
That's great.
Oh.
That's great. Well, this book actually does, as you may know if you've only read the last page, it does end on a vaguely, it ends on, people who have read it have said it's a darker book than Semper Sonnet, which is hard to believe, but because it doesn't, well, I don't want to give anything away, but the ending is a little ambiguous in the sense that because I think someday I might write a sequel to this if I can actually stay consistent for 2 books. So you'll see when you finish it that you finish it for real, that you do, it does sort of set up a sequel to it. Whether I write it or not is another story.
Yeah, and you're going to end up with Michelle hounding you about sequels.
That'd be great. I could use that. So send me an email about Semper Sonnet and this one also.
Well, I still want to get crap from her regularly because he wrote The Lemon Colored Life of Annie Astor, and he's coming on next week. And I think her first question to him is going to be like, okay, when's the sequel? You're going to get that. Now that you've said that, you said that in front of Michelle. It's like telling her that there's chocolate tomorrow. She's going to keep bugging you about the sequel.
I'd like to be bugged. As long as I know there's an audience, I'll write a book. So.
Well, you got 2.
Yeah, so. Maybe more than 2, but that's a start.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got us, and then hopefully people that are watching and listening, if you haven't heard already, we're giving away a copy. So I've got 2 copies here already. So yay, 2 copies. One's gonna go home with somebody,
or go home to somebody because they're not here.
Yeah.
I say that wrong.
Good clarification there.
Thank you. Yes, one of them is going to somebody can win one of those copies.
Do They email you or something? Is that how it works?
It's through Rafflecopter, and their ways of entering are either following us on Twitter, subscribing to our channel on YouTube, giving us a 5-star rating on iTunes. That's an option. Yeah. And visiting our Facebook page. So they have lots of different options. Each one counts for different numbers of entries. Like following us is 1. Subscribing to the channel counts for 3 entries. So they have 3 opportunities. Their name goes in the hat 3 times just for subscribing. And then twice if they do the 5-star rating. So they can do all of that too.
That's very clever.
Yeah, Diana's handling all of that. I don't understand how any of that works.
It's this wonderful computer program called Rafflecopter. It makes me look like I'm smart.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
If we're talking about sequels really quick, I just want to say that I still want to try to figure out the last sonnet that Lee wrote. Semper Sonnet, because I remember we talked about it and you said that there is a message hidden within the last sonnet. So I have to go back, and I'll probably have to enlist the help of someone who is much better with English history and sonnet.
Well, it's word game. So if you send me an email, I will send you back the key to unlocking that sonnet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I will definitely do that. Yeah. Yeah. It's not so much history. It's that it's, the wordplay in it and the embedded clues and stuff. So, yeah.
That is awesome. I'm totally going to send you an email about that now.
And it's funny.
A hint. Just pointing in the right direction.
Yep.
And it's so funny with Semper Sonnet because I gave my copy to Michelle before she moved, and then I forgot about it. I forgot that I'd given her the copy, and then was it 2 weeks ago? She was like, "Okay, I'm ordering books, and I'm finally going to replace your copy of Semper Sonnet because I'm keeping the copy you gave me."
Yeah,
it's like, that's where that went.
It's mine now.
Yeah,
I replaced it a year later, but I replaced it.
That's okay. Now I have a whole new one with a spine that needs to be broken in. So I have to read it.
New.
So I know we talked a little bit, as we're talking now, I remembered from our last conversation that you said you read a lot in airports while you're on layovers or waiting for flights. But do you have like a routine that you follow when you're writing?
Yeah, so I mostly, I do that sometimes, but I mostly write early in the morning. That's my routine. So because I do work during the day, so I work generally between like 6:30 and 7:30 in the morning on novels, on fiction, and I try to write 2 pages, and I feel really good if I've written 2 pages. And it's, if you write 2 pages a day, you have a book at the end of the year. But in my case, at least, they're very raw pages. I have to go back and rewrite and polish and change and edit and then edit some more. And but the hard part, as you probably know, is the first draft. Just sort of plowing through. It's like clawing through rock to just sculpt out the story. And once that's done, I feel I like editing my own work, and I like rewriting, and I like working with editors. But I generally work just a short period of time in the morning and try to get 2 pages done. And when I'm in the thick of it, I'll write 7 days a week, so I don't take any time off. So, because when you write this kind of fiction, genre fiction, particularly thrillers, you have a lot of balls in the air, and you've got to kind of remember what's going on. And at least I can't. If I take too many days off, I have no idea where I am. And I don't like to go back and reread my work until I'm done with it. So I need to keep moving forward. So I find if I write a little bit every day, I can do that. And it's a lot like exercise. Sometimes you actually dread it, and you don't necessarily enjoy when you do it, but when you're finished, you feel really good. You just feel like, wow, now I can eat a little extra or reward myself in some way, or I'm going to live a little longer, or I'll look a little better. And writing is like that. I don't particularly wake up in the morning eager to do it, and I don't necessarily enjoy it while I'm doing it, but I feel really good when I'm done. And as with exercise, when I don't do it, I feel really bad. That sense of like sloth and guilt. And so it's very much like that. It gives that same sort of anticipation or dread even, and then the high of completing it is great. So I try to do a little bit.
Why you love editing? Because right now I'm in the middle. I've been working on a book, and I'm in the midst of editing it, and I just actually hired an editor to help me get over that last hump, so that I can get an agent to pick it up. Tell me why you love editing.
I do because it's mostly because it's so, for me, it's so much easier than writing a first draft. I'd much rather look at a sentence and see if I can make it better than write that sentence the first time. And that's actually relatively easy. I mean, editing, the hard part of it is the overall story, making sure the characters are good, right? But even that, I prefer to go back. Once I have the whole thing roughed out, it's so much better to go back and polish it. And, you know, when my kids were in school, and, you know, they would have the dread of facing the blank computer screen to write a school paper. And I would always say, just write, just start typing, you know, just get something out there. And they said, no, but it's no good. And I said, you can make it good. Just get it on the page. And I would say that to any writer. It's like, just, you know, some people, I mean, there are writers who do shopping lists, you know, just to get their fingers warmed up. And
I actually did that for a story that I was playing around with. I couldn't get it started right, so the character wrote down her shopping list.
Yeah.
The opening of the book is her doing a shopping list.
I hadn't heard of someone who actually incorporated it into their work, but I think it sounds great. Yeah, I mean, I just find that self-editing is just much more of a pleasure for me. And also because when I'm doing it, it means I've already finished a first draft, which means the book is, I know that it's working on some level, right? I've gotten from the beginning to the end. And so to go back and make it better, I can do that with the confidence that I have something. Whereas until I type the end, I'm never 100% sure that it's there. You know what I mean? That I'm going to get there. So that's another reason that I generally prefer editing to writing. So.
Yeah, I like that. I've got confidence that I've got something actually finished.
Right. Yeah.
That makes me feel better about editing now.
Yeah, at least you've done it, and you know that the story is working, or at least working for you. And yeah, I think it's, for me, it's a bit of a joy to go back and do that. So also, you know, when you're working with an editor, or in my case, my agent does a lot of editing for me, big picture editing. You know, she'll tell me this isn't working or that is, before she submits it to a publisher. You know, there's a sense of power that you have. So over the story, it's hard to explain, but you can make things happen in a book in a way that clearly you can in life, right? And when I edit, I don't feel that when I write a first draft, but I do feel that when I go back to edit, an editor will say to me, or my agent will say to me, you know, this character needs a motive for what he did in chapter 3. So in life, you can't give someone a motive, right? They come fully baked and you take them as they are, but you can, and at first I'll think, oh, I don't know what that could be for my character. And then suddenly it hits you and you think, oh, in just a few sentences, I can put it in there. And now I've changed the whole sort of arc of that particular part of the book. And that's a great feeling for me, it's a feeling of power. It's just, I've been able to shape a character that way, you know. I don't ever confuse it with real life, but real life is not nearly as satisfying or is as simple as that. But in books, you have that sort of power to change the dynamic of stories. So
you're like the puppet master.
In a way, yeah.
It must be such a good feeling to type the end. I can't even tell you how many notebooks full of stories I have that I've never finished. And a project I was maybe a quarter way through, and I hit a wall, and I said, no, we're just going to start over. So I'm back at the beginning again, and the end seems so far away.
I know. Well, you know, it also helps, especially depending on what kind of fiction you're writing. But if you're writing commercial fiction, narrative fiction, you know, thrillers, I guess romances, I don't really read the mysteries. obviously to outline it, so at least you know what the end game is. You know where your characters are going to end up. If it's a mystery, you know what the resolution is. It's funny, when I wrote Losing Isaiah 20 years ago, I think, that was a book about a custody battle over a small child. And it was actually made into a movie with Halle Berry and Jessica Lange, were the two women fighting over this little baby and this child. And that was a book that I did not know how it was going to end until the end. I just didn't know how I was going to resolve it. I couldn't take a side between these two women. And one of the reviews said, it was that generally flattering review, might have been the Boston Globe, said, I could see the ending coming a mile away. And I remember thinking, well, I'm glad you could see it coming a mile away, because I wrote it and I didn't know how the thing was going to end. But that was probably the only case where I didn't know how a book was going to end when I started it. Pretty much, yeah. Although actually with Semper Sonnet, the twist at the end when you find out who her real identity was, that was a surprise to me. But
why did that come though?
Yeah, neither did I.
Well played on that one.
Yeah.
And speaking of reviews, do you like reading reviews? I feel like I couldn't maybe I could. I don't know. When I finally finish a book, if it does get published, I could just be like, whatever you think, I don't care what you think, it's done. I did it.
Right. Well, you should. I mean, there should be satisfaction in that, no matter what the review. So reviews mean someone's reading it, so that's always a good thing. And I can't help but read them, to be honest. And I will say that, and a lot of writers will say this, that you always remember the bad ones. Mm-hmm. And you remember the good ones too, but boy, one sort of twist of the knife about something you've written and you never forget it. But because of that, I don't do any book reviewing, but I do, mostly because I can never remember what I've read, and people are always asking me to recommend books. I am on Goodreads, and I keep a list of all the books that I read there, just as a way of having a list, so that when someone says, can you recommend a book, at least I can go back and remember what I've read. But unless I'm giving the author, I don't know, is it 5 stars is the most? Unless I'm giving him 4 or 5 stars, I just won't review it. I just think, even if I didn't like, I just finished a book that I really didn't like particularly, and I probably would give it, 2 stars or 3 stars. I couldn't possibly do that. And this is a sort of a best-selling book where the author probably has 2,000 Goodreads reviews. But mine would not be even noticed, I would imagine, but I just wouldn't do it.
I hate giving bad reviews because I do, as you know, I do the book reviews.
Yeah.
I hate them, and I try so hard to focus on what specific parts of the book work for me. Like I had to do 2 recently that I didn't like, and one of it was I was basically like, okay, I think this is just me. I think this is just me. This is not my time period. This is not my subject. I shouldn't be reading this. Was the path I took on it. The other one just truly made me angry. I was really looking forward to this book. And I was really looking forward to the subject matter. And everything about the book was just wrong and awful. And I was just so angry. I wanted to throw the book.
I know exactly which book you're talking about too. I got those text
It's hard because as writers yourself, you know what goes into writing a book and how, no matter what the story is, how personal it is, to put yourself out there like that. And I can't give, even bestsellers who do not need an endorsement from me, I cannot give less than 4 stars. I just don't, I leave none. And then I get emails from Goodreads saying, rate this book, and same thing with Amazon.
Yeah, I'll do a review on Goodreads. I'll do that, but I won't say anything about it. And sometimes I'll leave it off of the blog, and I did that for a long time where I wouldn't put them on the blog. And I was talking to a friend of mine who, she doesn't do book reviews, but she'll follow a lot of book blogs, and that's where she gets her, her recommendations for books. And she was like, as a book reviewer, you should be doing the bad reviews along with the good reviews. Because we need we need that balance. We need to know that you're going to be honest with your book reviews and point out the things that didn't work. I mean, there are some book reviewers that are just nasty. That I'm just like, really, you don't need to talk about somebody's book that they put their heart and soul into,
Right.
like that, because you're just taking their heart and you're just crashing it against the wall. But sometimes,
but as you say, on the other hand, if people are looking to you to help them decide what to read, and it's not just paying money for, but to invest, hours and hours of their time, I guess you owe it to, your allegiance probably should be to the readers, not necessarily to the author. But since no one's asking me to review a book, I won't, unless I can say, give a 5 stars, I just won't do it.
So are you reading anything right now, or is that book literally just the last book that you just finished?
Oh, no. So I finished that a couple of days ago. I won't name it, because I won't name a book that I don't like. But I'm now reading a book by George Saunders called Lincoln in the Bardo. So George Saunders is a great, great, great short story writer. He writes for the New Yorker. And if you write short stories, you should definitely read him. He's brilliant. And he's never written a novel. And this is a very strange book that takes place in one night in a cemetery during the Civil War, when Lincoln comes to visit the grave of his dead son Willie, who was 11 and died of typhoid, I think it was. And it sounds dreadful, but it's really pretty exciting. And it's told from in the voice of all these spirits that are in the cemetery. It's exactly the kind of book I don't like, except that I am interested in Civil War history. But I don't really like sort of ghost stories or spiritual stories. But this is really, so far, I'm only about 150 pages in. It's really good. So Lincoln in the Bardo. And but certainly look for George Saunders, his short stories. They're just exquisite. They're really something. So
that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Didn't you write a story, Diana, once about a bunch of different spirits?
Oh yeah, I did a short story in that. It was a friend of mine sent me. She was on a road trip from Massachusetts to Oklahoma. They were moving to Oklahoma for work, and they went through this town. It was right just before Christmas time, and in the center of town was town graveyard in the Midwest, middle of nowhere. And there was a giant Christmas tree in the cemetery, and just randomly, and the townspeople had a Christmas festival in the cemetery, and she posted a picture of it, and I was like, I couldn't help myself. I had to write this little short story about this Christmas tree, why this town had a Christmas festival in the middle of their cemetery.
I remember that.
Oh, that's lovely. Actually, that sounds like something that George Saunders might like. He has a sort of an absurdist sense. So you should, if you wrote that, you would definitely like him. It's really interesting.
Okay, I'll definitely have to look him up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I took a lot of inspiration from Neil Gaiman's The Graveyard Book.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm not really into the whole supernatural stuff, but that one, very much had that kind of similar thing as George Saunders stuff, where, this little boy his family's murdered, and he ends up being raised by the spirits in the graveyard.
Oh.
So and as much as it's this book about death, where, he's living amongst death, it's very much about life and growing up and coming into your own.
Mm-hmm.
It's this really beautiful book, so I took a lot of inspiration from that.
Oh, I'll look for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a fun one.
Yeah. Cool.
And I guess the last question for the night, since I know that we're running up to our hour now, do you know what you're going to work on next, or are you just kind of taking a break?
Oh, no, I'm always working on something, 1 hour every morning. So I'm knee-deep in a book.
Morning writer.
What's that?
I said, you morning writer is you and Michelle. We've got another friend who's a morning writer. I'm the night owl. I'm like the only night owl writer that I know. Yeah,
no, I have to sort of prove to myself that I've done it before I can move on with my day. It's that sort of exercise thing, So I'd never talk about what it is, but believe me, it has nothing to do with Semper Senat or presidency. That's just my MO. So, and I'm sort of at a point, I'm a little bit stuck with it at the moment. I finished it, and I'm editing it now, self-editing it, and I'm stuck on one particular issue that I got to figure out how to resolve. So it's my least favorite place to be writing-wise, because I like to get my 2 pages done or editing 4 or 5 pages, and I'm stuck on this one thing, so I don't feel very productive. But I'll figure it out.
Is it a different genre again?
No, it's a thriller. It's a thriller told from 3 perspectives, so in 3 voices, and so it's really complicated because everything that happens in it happens 3 times. So the complication is to add something each time, so it's not boring, right? And what you're adding is essentially what another person saw. So I set myself up a big challenge in that sense. Yeah, so when I'm to make a change that I need to make in this book, I have to not just change it in one place, I have to change it 3 places and figure out what the 3 different people know about. Anyway, so it's a complicated one. I'm a little frustrated. But.
Well, you have to get through it, because now we need to know what the book is.
Yeah, I want to do your 2nd birthday party too, but it's probably after that. So.
Well, that's perfect timing. You're going to be our summer read guy.
Yeah, happy to be.
Yes, I think that's a must now. So you have to finish this one by next summer. No pressure or anything.
Yeah, send me an email to remind me.
Okay. Oh yeah, you won't just get an email from us. You'll get like Twitter messages.
Okay. You'll Twitter shame me.
Oh, we totally will. We are not above that.
Yeah. If it works, I'll take it.
Well, so everyone, we mentioned it before, but be sure, I know Diana will post all the details. I don't know it.
The link on our Facebook, on Tumblr, and on Twitter. I think I shared on Twitter.
So to win this book. Okay. We've been talking about it all night, and I have 20 pages left in the book that I'm reading, which is pretty amazing, and it's creepy.
Okay. Everybody else is showing their copy.
But then I might actually end up starting on President's Day tonight, because now it's so far past my bedtime that I am wired. So I'll probably a rebel and stay up even later tonight.
Oh boy.
I know. I'll regret it in the morning though. Fridays are always the hardest day for me to wake up because of this one glass of wine. Fridays are just like, oh.
You're a lightweight.
A few years ago, a few kids ago, it wasn't necessarily the case, but things change. But thank you so much for joining us, Seth.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you again.
It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. So we look forward to you coming back for your next book.
I will. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.